What is going on, everyone? It is season 2. It is episode 1, and it is the Turning 2 podcast. That is Jasson. I am Hillel, and we are right around the corner from spring training. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Kirschner a little later on in the show. But before we get into that, let's talk some baseball.
Let's do it. Man, we are 8 days away from pitchers and catchers reporting. Things are going to pick up. Things are just going to get a lot more exciting. And we know when the Yankees are in season again, the fans get re-engaged, they get pumped, they get excited, and they want to hear what's going on. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to keep you in the loop on everything that's going on. And because we love the Yankees, we know you love the Yankees, and we want to be sure that we're all connected to this together.
Yeah, so pretty much baseball is a little bit quiet right now, getting into that phase. We spoke a little bit with Chris about some of the stuff that he thought Yankees could be going on. He had some interesting opinions there, so definitely stay tuned for that. Overall, what were your thoughts on the interview with Chris?
I thought it was fantastic. It's honestly refreshing, to have somebody who kind of tells it like it is, right? And it's just kind of organically honest and accurate with information, and do it in a way that, because you don't always get a beat writer or a player or something like that who's going to kind of treat you like an equal. He did exactly that, and we felt like we were just longtime friends. And I don't know if you felt that way. I certainly felt that way, and it was a good to get someone. He's in on the Yankees, he's connected. He's going to be reporting with guys like Ken Rosenthal and Jeff and some of the big timers. So be on the lookout. And he's a good reporter. He covered basketball too, so he's well versed and experienced, and he knows exactly what he's doing. So, and we had a great conversation. I enjoyed talking baseball, Chris.
Yeah, he was an awesome guy to talk with. So we're going to send it right over to that interview now. And yeah, look out for Turning 2 episodes, sending it over to us. All right, so we are here with the man, the legend, Chris Kirschner. I hope I pronounced that right, but thank you so much for joining us today. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. You pronounced it correctly.
All right, good. That was something I've been practicing all day, trying to get that down. So looking forward to talking to you. I'm here with Jasson. We're looking forward to talking some baseball, talking some Yankees with you. I want to start off by asking you, how awesome is it to fulfill your childhood dream by being a beat writer for the Yankees?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I grew up in the Bronx. I was 4 years old in 1996, which was a perfect time to be in the Bronx because that was really the start of their dynasty in the 90s. You had Derek Jeter coming up, Pettit, Rivera, Posada. So I had a perfect front row seat just a few miles away from Yankee Stadium growing up, the old Yankee Stadium. Me and my dad would go to the games pretty often. I played baseball pretty much all my life. So I knew from an early age that I either wanted to play for the Yankees. I wasn't good enough to play for the Yankees, but once I realized that, I'm obviously not going to become a baseball player. The second best thing is, covering the team on a day-to-day basis and having access to the locker room and having access to, talking to the players and writing stories about who they are, both on and off the field. I've only been covering the Yankees for a few months now, but, just in those few months, it was really, really cool to have a front row seat to Aaron Judge chasing history, the Yankees trying to get over the hump and win their first World Series since 2009. So I'm really looking forward to having like a full year around the team. And I'm heading to Tampa for spring training in a few days. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, I think all fans here listening to Athletic, reading about the Athletic with you and Cuddy just joining in, it's awesome seeing you guys, all the work you do out there. So props to you guys. Jasson, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you too, because you covered the Atlanta Hawks, you covered basketball too, right? And congratulations, you were 2021 Georgia Sports Writer of the Year as well. So congratulations to that. What do you see as similarities between covering basketball and baseball and differences? I was just curious to know if they're alike, if they're different, and how so.
I was actually telling somebody this earlier today. When it comes to reporting, there are no differences really when it comes to telling stories. The point I was making earlier to someone else was that, if you're a good reporter, you can cover basketball, you can cover baseball, you can cover lacrosse, it doesn't matter. The reporting skills still remain the same. Obviously, coming from covering basketball for 4 years and switching sports, there's an adjustment period for sure, just because I'm coming in brand new. I don't have long-standing relationships with anyone on the Yankees. They don't know who I am, so you have to kind of start from the ground up. And again, I only had a few months around the team. I have a couple of relationships, but as I get more experience, I will continue to meet different people and build relationships. But as far as like the day-to-day differences, I mean, the biggest one is baseball's played practically every day.
Yeah.
Basketball, you only have, they have back-to-back games, but there would be an off day on that third day where they're not practicing, where they're not playing at all. So that's a big difference. And also just understanding like how the league operates. There are two different collective bargaining agreements. They're different personalities. So really understanding those dynamics are really two of the biggest differences for sure.
Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
I was gonna say, just hearing about how you had how you going games with your father. I'm 13. I love going to games with my dad, so it just makes me appreciate everything so much more. Hearing them from all these guys in the majors, especially you, hearing all the stories is just awesome. Yeah, Jasson, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to ask you, like, to kind of follow up my question. Is it kind of adapting and learning each environment and each person's kind of eccentricities and learning how to connect to these things to them in that way, and kind of learning how to ask the right questions and figuring out how to connect with these individuals? Is a lot of that involved in what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to figure out ways to communicate with everybody on the team, everybody around the team, coaches, front office people, my colleagues who also cover the team. A lot of what journalism is about is making relationships and having people trust that you would tell their stories correctly, fairly, accurately. I mean, sometimes like you're going to have to criticize people, but for the most part, especially players, like they understand that is part of the business. Like it's not going to be, sunshine and rainbows 24/7. It just doesn't work that way. There've definitely been times over the years where players haven't liked a question I've asked, or players don't agree with how I wrote something or whatever it might be. But for the most part, it's usually handled, and we both move on with our days. So I think that is definitely the most challenging part about being a reporter, is finding ways to connect with people who are totally different than you, who may not look like you, who don't know who you are as a person, may have different religious beliefs, political beliefs, whatever it might be. So it's kind of a two-way street, just like understanding like where each other is coming from. So once you get that part down, the rest flows pretty easily.
I gotta give you guys a lot of credit for that, especially if you do it accurately and honestly. Like I think it's the best way to kind of communicate, and I guess if there's any misunderstanding, be able to clean it up pretty easily as long as you're accurate and honest. So I give you guys a lot of credit for that, and so thank you for doing that, what you do.
No problem.
Yeah, so talking on the note of relationships with players, I want to ask you, has there been one highlighted conversation that you've had with a player, and what did you discuss in that conversation?
What do you mean by that?
Has there been like one interesting conversation, sorry, I should specify that you had with a player, and what did you discuss?
I did a story with Yankees specifically. I did a story on Nestor Cortez in the playoffs, just about how, just where he grew up in Hialeah. After I grew up in the Bronx, I moved to Florida, so I'm familiar with Hialeah, and it's a mostly a Cuban immigrant town, and that's where Nestor's originally from, and just about like how he kind of emerged last season. Last season was really his first season where he was on the map, but this season he like kind of proved that he's one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. So we were just talking about his upbringing and how he got to this point. Another one, I did a long story during the season on Jose Trevino and his father, and almost quitting baseball after his dad died. That one took a lot of time and effort, because whenever you're dealing with something so personal, like a death in the family, especially with a parent, you want to make sure that you tell that story as best as you possibly can, because you want to do that conversation justice. Because I'll never forget, like, the first time I was speaking with Jose about the story, he was crying at his locker before a game. So like, when you see that, as not even just as a reporter, but like as a human, like, how deeply he cares about that subject. So you want to make sure you're telling, when you ultimately write the story, like, you want to make sure like you do a good job with it. And Jose, after the story came out, said that he loved it, his family loved it, and I think that definitely meant a lot to me, knowing that I did a good job with that story.
Yeah, you said that perfectly. And working with Trevino seems like an awesome guy. Seeing videos of him, seems like we saw all the stuff with his father, and it just seemed like such a wholesome story. Everything was awesome about that. I want to transition to the current Yankees right now. Do you think that the Yankees are done this offseason? And if not, what do you see them doing?
It's hard to say. I mean, a lot of the times in any sport, trades don't happen until they happen. Obviously, I think that they're wanting to upgrade, and especially in left field. I think if they don't get anything done during spring training, which obviously starts in a few days now, if they don't get something done by then, or if they don't get something done before spring training ends, I still think that they're going to make a move probably around the deadline. I think they need at least one more left-handed hitter, because right now the lineup is really right-hand dominant. And I also think that they don't want, I mean, they will publicly say that they're okay with having Aaron Hicks as the starting left fielder, but we saw how that ended last season and how that went. And I really can't see that continuing for the entirety of the season. So if nothing happens, prior to the end of spring training, I would be shocked if they didn't make some sort of big move to upgrade the roster by the trade deadline, which is August 1st. So it's possible that they go into the season with the current roster and, have a platoon of Hicks and Oswaldo Cabrera, who played left field pretty often in the playoffs, and he showed that he is very capable of playing many positions. In my opinion, I think Cabrera's value is with playing all those positions, because guys ultimately get hurt, or guys are slumping, or they need a day off, and you can just plug Cabrera into any position pretty much other than catcher. So I think for the Yankees, what we'll see is, in the meantime, it's probably going to come down to Aaron Hicks and Oswaldo Cabrera in left field. And I think Hicks is going to win just because of what I said. I think the Yankees think Cabrera's value is with playing many positions.
Yeah, I actually call him the Yankees version of Ben Zobrist, because
that's a perfect comparison.
Super duper utility guy who can play the outfield well, can play the infield well, and I think it's a great way to kind of ease him into a more full-time role at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think he has a lot of value to the Yankees. But you mentioned something good, important, because I've never seen a GM that was more tight-lipped than Brian Cashman. Getting information out of him or trying to read him is so difficult. And I don't know if you agree with that, but like, it's like you said too, they could be doing this, they could be doing that, but we could just wake up tomorrow morning and Cashman has pulled the blockbuster trade and nobody would have known about it. And I guess that's the thing that frustrates a lot of fans, but the thing that fascinates a lot of fans too, particularly me, because he's done this stuff a lot, right? Like, none of us thought he was going to trade for Clay Holmes. we were running around with our hair on fire saying, oh my gosh, they got rid of Hoyt Park. And then now it's like he got Clay Holmes. So, and he's done a lot of these great trades. So does that type of stuff make it tougher for folks like you to communicate with GMs where it's really, really difficult to get any intel out of them at all? And what type of intel do you even expect out of these folks?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. One of the first things that I was told when I got the job is it's going to be very different than what I experienced with the Hawks, because I was able to get information from pretty much anybody in the Hawks. Whereas with the Yankees, it's old school. Cashman's been here in New York pretty much my entire life. He's been with the organization before I was born. And he's been GM for, I think, 25. This is his 25th season. So I was 5 years old when Cashman was the GM. So he's been around obviously for a long time. Mm-hmm. So it's you have an organization like that where you're trying to cover it. It's certainly a challenge because everybody in the organization knows that it's Cashman is at the top and it kind of falls in a straight line. Whereas other organizations, it may branch out and you may be able to talk to this person or that person and get information. The Yankees are challenging, and I'm definitely learning that in my first few months on the beat. I think that for me personally, spring training is going to be very valuable for me because you're able to develop really good relationships where everybody is in one area. They're all in Tampa. There's no stress of winning daily. No one cares if you win or lose a spring training game. So I think in that regard, it's going to be very valuable, but it's certainly a challenge when, sometimes general managers are, could mislead reporters. I'm not saying I've experienced that with the Yankees and it hasn't happened, but I certainly know just from talking with general managers in the past, they could tell you something and it's just totally not true. And you have to do a good job of finding out what actually is accurate. So that's one of the hardest parts about the job.
Talking about accuracy, I want to ask you, the day, we can call it the arson judge day, I guess. What was that day like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was I was in San Diego for winter meetings. I saw that pop up on my phone. I was like freaking out because I knew like when that happened that my day is going to be completely tied up with this. And I was trying to contact people within the organization, and kind of right away, someone said like, we have not heard anything. So I thought that was weird because like I figured that, if Judge was going to San Francisco, that he would have told the Yankees prior to actually making that decision. So I thought that was strange that they hadn't heard anything. And then I think it was like 15-ish minutes later, the reporter ended up correcting himself and said it was false alarm. But that's one of those stories where everybody makes mistakes, but there are mistakes that you really can't make, and getting Aaron Judge's free agency wrong is just one of those mistakes that you just can't do it. It's different if it's like a middle reliever who like no one really has heard of, and it's like, oh, okay, like I got it wrong, and that's fine. Again, everybody makes mistakes, but Judge is the one guy you just can't mess up because of the magnitude of the player, the magnitude of the significance of like, this guy is obviously like the franchise player for the Yankees and he's leaving. So that would be a huge story. So yeah, I mean, like those 15 minutes, like for me, were like hectic trying to like figure out like, is this actually happening? But I will say, like, just from, he ended up signing, I think that in the morning.
Yeah, the next morning.
But I will say, like, the Yankees were certainly worried that he was going to San Francisco because they felt that this report didn't come out of nowhere. Like he heard it from somebody. So they felt that it was trending toward San Francisco at the time. And I spoke to, several people who were like, during that day before he signed, that, we have no idea now where he's going. I think San Diego was coming. He was coming to San Diego, ended up meeting with the Padres. The Padres were willing to give him $400 million. So there's definitely concern on the Yankee side, but as a reporter, I knew my day was going to be really, really long.
I can only imagine. I mean, I can only imagine what you would have gone through that day and over there, and like what everybody else went through. But I had a question. What reporters did you kind of look up to? Did you say, okay, I want to do this? Who motivated you to do what you're doing now? Out of curiosity.
The biggest one for me was Stuart Scott. I always
He's great.
I grew up watching SportsCenter, and he was the main guy on there. He was someone who he wasn't an old white man, and he did things differently. And I knew that like I wanted to, be my authentic self and show personality. So he was one. I actually got to meet Stuart when I was in college. My professor took his class. He was an NFL reporter. Took the class to New Orleans for Super Bowl Media Day. Ravens 49ers. Stuart was there. I got to talk to Stuart for like 30 minutes, and he ended up like giving me his cell phone number and was like, stay in touch. So he was really, really cool. That's definitely like the number one person I grew up wanting to be. I did TV when I was in school. I decided not to do TV after school because the salaries were very, very low, and I would have had to move to random towns in America, and I had no interest in that. Like being from New York City, like I couldn't see myself living in a really small town. So he was definitely number one. I mean, local reporters too. I grew up. I grew up a Yankees fan, so I was reading Yankees coverage. Jack Hurry was certainly one of my favorite reporters growing up. My favorite book growing up was The Life You Imagine, which Jack Hurry wrote. It was Derek Jeter's biography. Mm-hmm. So like I knew that he was someone like I wanted to emulate. Mike Wilbon, who was with Washington Post, he's been with ESPN for forever now. But like again, like people who were like authentic and who they are and weren't afraid to like share opinions. Like nowadays, I really love who's become a mentor to me, Marcus Thompson. He covers the Warriors for The Athletic. Been super beneficial to me in my career. My current editor is Mark Carrig. He covered the Yankees and Mets for several years. He's been someone who's been just a tremendous help for me as I transitioned to baseball. I mean, there's so many people though, like just growing up and reading and especially following baseball, like Tim Kirchin, Buster Olney, now like Jeff Passan. I love reading Jeff's stuff. It's hard to like pinpoint one person, but I think two people who've been very, very helpful for me are Marcus and my current editor, Mark.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you one final question. If you could go back to one point in your career, would there be one point that you would go back and do differently?
Trying to think.
This is always my brain teaser question. I get everyone on this one.
And it's a good question. I haven't had an arson judge screw up, so that's out of the question. I mean, like there are definitely. I mean, I can't think of like one specific moment off the top of my head. I mean, I know that again, like I was saying before, everyone makes mistakes, and there have been questions where I could have phrased differently. There have been moments where I wish I would have written something differently and provided more context. when I was covering the Hawks, like um, Trey Young, who's the star point guard, sometimes we didn't see eye to eye. But I really don't think there was anything I could have done differently with that. There's really like no one moment where I was like, I wish I could have taken that back in my career. I feel like I'm a fair reporter. I feel like I do a good job in trying to get the most accurate story. Again, sometimes you're not going to bat 1,000. But for the most part, I feel like I do an honest job. And
Most certainly
that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, you most certainly do. We all Yankee fans appreciate it. I was thrilled to see that you're joining and looking forward to seeing a full season. We really appreciate you joining. It's a great thing that you don't have anything that you would go back to regret. So thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of Jasson and I, we really appreciate you joining us. Any last things you want to say before you head off?
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I think it's a great thing that you're getting this experience at your age. Experience is what really matters in journalism. So if this is what you want to do long term, stick with it and continue reaching out to people, and you never know where it could wind up when you're after high school or college or whatever it is you might want to do one day.
Yeah, thank you so much. Jasson, anything you want to say while we wrap up?
And echoing what you said too, as content creators, Hillel and I are. I think it's one of the things we get from you folks is you're not going to make everybody happy no matter what you do, right? So we try to be as honest and as accurate as possible. That's the least we could do as content creators. Put out accurate information, corroborated with some of the folks that you mentioned, like the passing and everybody else. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the best we can do, and I think it's the most important thing. If we're accurate and honest at the end of the day, then we can put our heads down at the end of the night and feel good about it. So 100%. We thank you for what you do too.
No, I think that's a really good point. And it's one that I feel like, especially like young journalists don't understand, is that if you're in this job, you're going to make someone upset.
Yeah.
It's a guarantee. No one is going to. The one thing that I will say is, like, if you're doing this job and you make 100% of the people you cover happy, you're not doing journalism. You're doing public relations. Someone's going to be upset with you. Someone's going to be upset. I can guarantee that there will be a point during this season where several players will be upset with something I ask or something I wrote. And that's just the nature of the job. But as long as you are doing fair work and accurate work, that's all that matters. If they're upset with that, then that's really on them.
Would you say that's the toughest thing to overcome or just understand as a journalist and as a sports writer, that particular thing? And just not everybody's going to be happy, and you're going to have to learn how to accept it, I suppose, right? And just, I'm doing my job. Right?
Yeah, it took some time. I'm 30 years old now. I'm still, I've been doing this professionally for 8 years now. It's still relatively young in my career, but the first time I had a coach curse me out and chew me out, I was probably 23, but I knew what I was doing was accurate. And so it's whatever. If he doesn't like me, then someone else will, and someone else will help me with whatever story I'm working on. There's always going to be someone who's going to talk to you. If someone doesn't like you, there will be another person waiting to speak with you, and you move on about your day.
Yeah. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, Chris. It's a pleasure having you on the show. We are right around the corner from spring training. Really looking forward, and we will see you next time.